Hi there, this is Elise Benin, your marketing mentor. And this is the podcast for you if and only if you are ready to leave the feast or famine syndrome behind, and I mean for good. If dealing with money sends you into a panic or talking about money scares you, this episode is for you. And it's a bonus ep, as we podcasters say. My friend, financial expert and fellow podcaster, Farnoosh Torabi, she's the host of the So Money podcast, has a brand new book out. It's called A Healthy State of Panic. Follow your fears to build wealth, crush your career, and win at life. And in August, we hosted an exclusive live event with Farnoosh on Zoom, where she shared a taste of the book and much more, actually, including stories about her own life and her struggles with panic and fear around money. In fact, she answered most of my questions with a story. That's her preferred style, she told us. So I was thinking we could share that audio with you here on the Marketing Mentor podcast to celebrate the launch of her book. So listen and learn. Excellent. So welcome, everyone. I'm Elise Benin of marketing-mentor.com, and I am here with Nancy Russo of the Creatives Roundtable and Danielle Hughes of More Than Words Copy and Marketing, and Farnoosh Torabi, the host of the So Money podcast and author of the new book, A Healthy State of Panic. So welcome, Farnoosh. We are thrilled to have you here today.
Thank you, Elise. Thanks to everybody for joining. Really excited for our time together this afternoon. I can technically say afternoon on the East Coast. It's 12:02.
Yes.
It's been a crazy morning. I'm really looking forward to the day progressing.
Well, I'm going to give a little introduction and then we'll have a conversation. And if you have questions, we hope you have questions. Please put them in the chat and we will monitor the chat and then feed them to Farnoosh. But just to set this up, I was introduced to Farnoosh through Terry Trespicio, who seems to know everybody, when Farnoosh invited me to be on her podcast, So Money, to talk about specifically money issues that the creatively self-employed people struggle with. And since then, I've been a loyal listener, and I always learn something from every episode. So, of course, I was all in when she announced this new book coming out in October, which all of you are going to get a copy of in October. It's called A Healthy State of Panic. There it is. Beautiful. Excellent. Can't wait to read it. And, it's well known that when you're launching a book, you need a lot of friends. So we are here today to support and help get the word out. And of course, learn a little something too. So thank you so much for being here. And I want to just read the introduction to the conversation that you shared with me so we can kind of orient ourselves. It's called Mastering a Money Mindset. Living your best financial life well isn't just about managing your dollars and cents wisely. It has much to do with adopting the right mindset, discipline, and behaviors to navigate what can sometimes be an overwhelming aspect of life. We all know that. In her forthcoming book, A Healthy State of Panic, Farnoosh gives us permission to listen to our fears and extract their wisdom to help us make the best financial moves. So that sounds really interesting to me. And, even this idea of fears about money, like embracing your fears, I'm really intrigued by that idea. So let's start by you introducing yourself and explain how a young woman at the age of 22 with $30,000 in debt ends up being one of the most sought after financial experts. How did you do that?
Thank you, Elise. Well, the how, there's two stories to tell there. One of the stories dates way back to childhood, and I talk about this in the book. And It's no secret, I'm the daughter of immigrants, Iranian immigrants who came here in the late 70s. I was born in 1980. And while I credit my parents for giving me an early relationship with fear, because like all immigrants, I think there's an undertone of like anxiety and fear that we all face. My parents face as they're trying to build basically a new life here. My mother, especially, because she didn't speak the language. She didn't have a college degree at the time. She was 19 when she had me. So she was like a really terrified person. And I was basically an appendage to my mother. And so you can only imagine the terror that I lived with as a young kid. But more importantly, I think that in addition to learning how to engage with fear at an early age, I also learned how to be around money conversations as a kid. My parents, I think like a lot of maybe Middle Easterners or even just immigrants where there's a different culture around money than in the United States. We're very weird here when it comes to money. We don't talk about it. We think it's rude. We think it's taboo. And it's kind of the opposite, at least from where my parents grew up in Iran. And so they come here and it's not to say that all the conversations were bright and cheerful. It was actually, when I talk about my own fear of money, and it's a central chapter in my book, it has a very distinct sound to me. It takes me back to the times when my parents would argue and there would be fists banging on laminate kitchen counters. And I was terrified of their arguments, but also in some ways it was an early education on the complexities of money, how we have to talk about this, even if it creates dissonance and friction. And usually there was some resolve. I would also see the other end of it where maybe they wouldn't talk to each other for about a week, but then they would come together and have, a plan. And in addition to that, my parents taught me a lot about the importance of establishing credit, asking for more, getting an education, which is a foundation, maybe not so much anymore. If you can avoid the student loans, it can be a real ROI in terms of, getting a leg up in your career. And so I had a foundation, essentially all this to say that I had a foundation, a fluency around money earlier than probably my peers. But that didn't mean that I had a straight path. Of course, you mentioned the tens of thousands of dollars in debt, which was a combination of credit card debt and graduate student loan debt, living in New York City, making $18 an hour before taxes. So I got into a bit of a financial pickle. And what helped me sort of get out of that was my job as a journalist. I had to every day write about personal finance for everybody else. And in some ways that was an advantage too, because I had access to experts and sources and books and I was just in it all the time. It's like I had an abnormal level of financial education early in my career as a result of what I did for work that then informed how I would help myself. And then I realized quickly that, as I worked then at the time at Money Magazine, this was like the early 2000s, and there were probably 3 or 4 financial experts that we could, recognize. Maybe they were household names like Dave Ramsey, Susie Orman. There was not a lot of diversity in the space, ethnic diversity, age diversity, life experience diversity, race diversity, religion diversity. And so that all matters when you're talking about money. All of that influences your lens through which you see the financial world. And I realized quickly that for myself, at least as a woman, as a young person at the time, as somebody who had an immigrant background, that I had a narrative and some offerings to give in this space that might inspire others who see themselves in me to go do the things that are important with their money. Because when I worked at Money, it was very clear for the first day, they said, our audience is a white man who has been successful financially and just kind of wants to up level and retire well. That was it. And I thought, I feel like there's underserved markets. And I remember my English teacher always said to me, write what you know, don't pretend to be someone you're not. And it's the best advice. It's the easiest thing to do. And so I just started to write about what I knew, which was my own struggles, my own friendships and what my friends were going through. And writing my first book essentially came out within a couple of years of that, called You're So Money. And that kind of set me off on a path of becoming not just an author, but apparently that when you become an author, you become an authority. I didn't know that. And so suddenly everybody wants my advice. I'm like, wait a minute, I wrote a book. Isn't that enough? No. Can you come on our show and talk about it? Can you come do this speech and talk about it? And I kind of just went with the current, but along the way realized the importance of when you're, whatever content you create, whether it's in the personal finance space or in the health space, that there is a aspect of sort of going with the momentum, but you have to build it yourself. You have to consciously create important pieces of content, thought leadership that moves the needle, that keeps you out there, that keeps your audience engaged. And that is my job, right? My job in this business that I've created is to always be offering something refreshing to my audience that doesn't feel like an echo chamber. I think sometimes whatever domain you're in, creative space, like it's very easy to sort of just like go with what's popular, or what, that this is going to be successful because you've already seen it be successful for others. So you're just going to do that. But I think that it's important to take the risks, to go out there, to go on a limb. Like my last book was about female breadwinners and how this was 10 years ago now. So it was very, very new to be able to talk openly about what it's like to be a woman in a heterosexual relationship, making more than her man, and the complexities. And it was extremely taboo at the time, but I was experiencing it in my own life. And I felt, if I'm an expert and this is something that I'm having a little bit of an issue with in my own personal life, there's probably a story here. There's probably something meaty here. And and so this book is really about fear, and how, as I've been working in this space now for over 20 years, money is emotional, as we know, but it seems like the emotional pattern is fear. Like when people ask me about whether or not to do something high stakes with their money, whether it's investing or leaving their job or starting a business or, trying to get out of debt at the expense of maybe not doing other things, it's terrifying, because when we talk about money, we're talking about life and our role in it. And we're worried about what if it doesn't work out, and it could mean risking not just the money, but relationships, and there can be regret tied to it. So it's very complex. And I, for one, think that all emotions are valid, that we tend to live in a culture that wants us to focus just on happiness and joy, which of course is important, but there's a reason that fear shows up, just like all the other emotions. And just like you can get carried away with happiness, we can get carried away with fear. But I also think that fear can be a source of self-realignment. It's when you fear something, what is it really? It's trying to protect you. It's a natural instinct. It's essentially trying to tell you what you care about, what you're trying to protect. And now as an adult, it's our job to go, okay, cool. How am I going to do that in a way that's not going to jeopardize or be irrational, that I can actually protect the thing that I'm afraid of losing or sacrificing in this decision in a way that I can leverage my resources. I can be strategic to ultimately allay the fears, but let the fear guide me to what it is ultimately that I do want to protect. And in our financial life, we want to protect this limited resource called money, which is not a small thing. And I think that it's time to stop feeling bad about yourself when you feel fear, that it's a weakness, that you're doing it wrong. I've never been able to be fearless. I've done everything in my life because everything great in my life has been a derivative of recognizing that I'm afraid of something and I should probably sit with that decision for a little bit longer and be more strategic and do it in a way that feels more self-aligned and safe and secure.
And, one of the things I've noticed actually on your podcast, and I listen to Susie Orman also, and there is some financial advice, but mostly the focus is on mindset and thinking about money in the right way. And also, as you're talking, I'm thinking about how the older we get, perhaps the more fearful when it comes to money, because actually, as Linda Secondari said to me the other day, the more we have at stake. And so, I don't know, speak to that a little bit if you could.
Yes. So money, the fear of money is very much an adult fear. As a kid, my parents didn't have a lot, but I never felt afraid of going without because they modeled so many things to me that was like they went for their values and they used their money carefully and they saved, but they also didn't make us. We lived in a community where everybody was sort of in the same economic boat. So I didn't really have a lot of comparison anxiety or like FOMO. I just thought everybody hung out with their relatives on the weekends. I mean, and everybody bought a dish. Like that's what you do. So I wasn't like, oh, everyone's going to Greece. But as we get older and we start making our own money, I think what we bring into the adult world is all the childhood experiences that we had. And so a lot of times when I say when you're afraid of money as an adult, maybe what you're afraid of is a narrative that you grew up with that doesn't really have space anymore in your life, but nevertheless, it's hung around because childhood trauma is hard to detach from, or it's just highly, highly influential. And yeah, of course, when you get older and you have the money and it's scarce and it's limited, you want to do right by it, because when you make a choice with money, even if it feels empowered and it feels like the right choice, it is a trade-off. It does mean not doing something else. And so I think, especially now in the age of social media and everybody sharing and all this transparency, like, are you really in Greece or is that a green screen? I can't tell. That we feel like there's a lot of feeling of missing out with our financial choices, even though we may be doing what we think is what we want to be doing, but there's always a voice of doubt, perhaps. And I think that the economic system that we live in, it can feel like it's setting us up for failure sometimes. Like I just wrote an op-ed about how, is it true that like working hard and there's this TikTok that went viral and they wanted me to write about it. It was this mom essentially who was in her 50s who was expressing a lot of hopelessness around her adult children ever being able to leave the house. And they have college degrees, they have a job, but she's like, they can't afford their own rent. They can't even afford car insurance. And they're living with me. And it was really cramping her style. And she was like, but she wasn't blaming her kids, which was really refreshing this is the reason that TikTok went viral, because it was like finally a 50-something-year-old mom who's not going to like say, why can't you do what I did? Why can't you just like figure it out like I did? And it's because the times have changed, because the deck is sometimes stacked against us. And this is a white woman with white children, and they're able-bodied. And so if they can't make it, what about someone who may have like a disability or is not like everybody else in their community or in the work culture, is a woman of color, is a single mother? And so, yeah, I get it. Like the world is a scary place and the system is not always going to work in your favor, even though you feel like you're doing all the right things. And so that's scary. And these are not, again, realizations as kids. We learn this. We are reminded of this every single day as we walk through life and we open our eyes and see actually what is happening. And it doesn't mean that you have to stay in your parents' basement forever. It doesn't mean that you're never going to be able to achieve your financial goals. It really just means that, at least for me, my parents didn't just say work hard. They said, recognize that there are inequalities and there are uncertainties in the world and things might not go your way. In fact, they probably won't go as you think they're going to go. So then what are you going to do about that? And they were always like preparing me for these what ifs. I remember my mom and dad dropped me off at college, 20 years ago. And they said, my mom, on a very heartwarming advice on her way out, she said, Farnoosh, if you ever find yourself in credit card debt, don't call us. Like, we're not helping you. That's terrifying thing to say to an 18-year-old. Because if you show me someone in college who doesn't have a little bit of debt, and I'll show you someone who hasn't eaten in a long time. Like, this is a rampant problem in college. This credit card debt. It's almost like a rite of passage at this point. Like, get into some credit card debt. You're really adulting. I just think my parents never let me get too comfortable. And that is a gift. I think that as adults, the ability to navigate your fear of uncertainty and your fear of money and your fear of failure these are vital emotional and strengths to essentially like feel like you're still winning.
And what about when you're self-employed? I don't know if you're self-employed now, but I know that you have been kind of in and out of that. And I feel like that adds another layer. I don't know if it's another layer of fear or uncertainty. How have you experienced that?
Oh yeah. I mean, I can speak very recently. I have been self-employed, incorporated since 2009, since I got laid off essentially from my media job back in the Great Recession. And as my one entrepreneur friend says, like, you eat what you kill what you eat. Like, it's just, it's like Hunger Games every day. And so I'm down. I like hard work. I like thinking creatively. I love, like, I feel like I do have vision, but I'm also like very real, and I will spreadsheet out something just to make sure there's like ROI. Like, I really enjoy being in charge of my own financial destiny. That being said, do I miss the comfort of like a recurring paycheck? Sometimes. And in the pandemic, when I had just moved to a new house, big mortgage, like, I'm the breadwinner still in my family. The stock market is not being very nice to us. I started to get a little scared about our financial security, as also typically how I earn in my business is I work with brands, and that the marketing budgets were getting smaller or just vanishing in 2020 and 2021. So I was like, okay. And it wasn't like I was going on, job hunting site. I wasn't like going back onto like LinkedIn to try to find jobs. It was that I was working as a freelancer somewhere, and the company that, the people in charge reached out and said, we're looking to hire someone full time to help us launch a financial vertical at one of our media companies. We think you'd be great. We like your podcast. We could license it. And so we worked out a deal where I wasn't going to throw out the baby with the bathwater. Like, I wasn't like, great, full-time job, bye business. I was like, no, this probably won't work out long-term, but right now it sounds like a great solve for the fear that I'm feeling, which is just that this business that I've created, it feels fragile right now. And I can't afford fragility in this era of my life as I'm raising 2 kids now. And like, I just need to, and my husband has a full-time job, and that wasn't, we just didn't know. There was a lot of uncertainty. So how I deal with my fear of uncertainty is I try to secure what I can. And I also recognize that it may not work out, and I'm going to have a plan B. So when I entered that full-time relationship, I negotiated keeping my business, and I had a really good prenup. I hired a lawyer who helped me make it so that if and when things didn't work out and we parted ways, that I could part ways really easy. No, not too many entanglements. I could just go back to basically doing what I was doing before. But I thought, hey, if I can at least for 2 years get a 401k, get health insurance, get a paycheck, and just kind of keep status quo and know that status quo will be kept for the next 2 years, like, I'm going to do that. And it didn't work out ultimately. We parted ways last winter. And I have no regrets. I think that it was like, it came into my life. I recognized the opportunity because I was scared. I was like, oh, this can help me, because it's identifying, this will protect what my fear is trying to help me protect, which is my financial security in this moment in time that is so precarious. And I'm not a fool to think that, mergers are like match mades in heaven. I think that I just sort of saw it as, at best, a short-term solve, at worst, a short-term solve, at best, maybe a long-term relationship. And it's fine. I think I've always been really open-minded and flexible. I get pitched a lot of ideas on growing my business. Just today, I was talking to somebody who was pitching me coming into her podcast network and maybe obviously paying her to then get me deals. And I just thought, I don't know. I kind of like keeping things simple. Like I kind of know what enough is for me at this point, and I have a lot on my plate. It's not like I'm just, you know, I'm not aiming for mediocrity, but I'm also, I know when I might be overextending myself, and when I know that this is just not the right time. Like that sounds compelling and interesting, but maybe after the book launch, or let's just see where this book takes me. I'm a big believer in like investing in a project, setting it up for success to the best that you can, and then just like letting it fly and letting it steer you a little bit. Like,
yeah,
you've earned it.
And, when you talk about fear, also, I feel like there's a very thin line between fear and desperation. And often people, edge over into that desperation. So if you were desperate, for example, you might grab at all the straws. But how do you walk that line? Or how do you think about that line between fear and desperation?
So I like to tell things through story. I feel like a lot of this doesn't have like clear steps or framework, but I think through story, you can really start to glean like, oh, this is how you do it. So a couple of weeks ago, I was hosting a live podcast in New York City with a celebrity. And it was like the most beautiful, it was like almost too good to be true, which you'll realize like it was. I had invited some friends and family and media, and it was a closed event. It was like a private event that this brand had funded. It was like a gift from the gods. Like a brand came and was like, let's work together. For us, it'll be great because we're going to get exposure on your podcast and get some media. And you can obviously, for me, it was great because this is actually where I want to go in my business with the podcasting. I want to do more live experiences. So I thought, okay, let's do this. And like, if it doesn't, as long as I get it and I get on the other side of it, I can maybe use it as a model for pitching to other brands to do this in the future. Great. So we were supposed to have a celebrity guest. My friends are like coming in on the train, and 2.5 hours before we're basically supposed to go live in front of the audience, the guest cancels. And it's a celebrity guest. So it's not like I could just pull like my husband on stage and call it like, a quick solve like that. Like I really needed to find someone of high caliber in terms of like, because that's just what the audience was expecting. Like I felt like it would be really a letdown. And, I just didn't want to let people down. And there was a lot at stake. I was like, the brand had money at stake. Like to call this whole thing off was just not an option. And it wasn't my job to go find another guest. The brand, there were like 12 or 15 marketing people in the other room, like all like chasing their tails, like trying to figure out like who they were going to get in replacement. And I was in a conference room all by myself, like terrified, like I was staring at, one of my teammates, and I was like, am I going to have to save this? Like, is this happening? And so I just reached out. It was like a healthy state of panic live. And I just said, okay, because the brand was panicking in a bad way. They came to me and they said, what if one of us just interviews you on stage? And I was like, yeah, everybody knows who I am. Like, this is not so, like, I love that you think that I'm special enough to fill in the shoes of this celebrity guest. But, even if I was, like, everyone who's coming here already knows me. Like, there's nothing new for them to hear, and it would just be boring. In that moment, I realized I have leverage. I can push back on the brand right now because they failed. They didn't have a signed contract with the celebrity, which they told me they had. So when I heard that, I was like, oh, so I put my reputation on the line for you, and now you're just going to tell me how things are going to go now? No, give me 30 minutes. So I go in my phone, I call my literary agent who was on vacation. And I was like, 'cause she knows celebrities. Her agency represents authors who are notable and well known. And it's the actor strike. So this is why also this is a real problem for us, because the person who's canceled was an actor. And we had already cleared though with her, like she was going to be fine but something, she had a change of heart that afternoon. I think she just realized like, it's just not cool to profit from her celebrity. And she was going to make a lot of money. So, nevertheless, I said, there's got to be somebody who can it's New York. So I called my literary agent. I said, who do you know that's like, can be here in 2 hours? It's a big fee. They'll make a lot of money. It'll be the easiest thing they ever do. I'm a softball interviewer. Like this isn't Christian Amanpour hour. Like I am just going to ask them about like their splurges, what they think of money. Like it's a safe audience. And within like an hour, I had secured someone fantastic. And she came, and it was probably better than I could have ever hoped. I don't know how it would have gone with the other person, but I can't even imagine it going as well as it did with this person who was a comedian and an actress, and she just kept us entertained for like 45 minutes. It was incredible, and it's going to launch soon, so you'll know what I'm talking about in about a week. But
awesome.
I think like in that panic, I was like, I could just
freak out,
cancel this whole thing. I could freak out. I could start yelling. I could start to burn bridges with this brand, but instead I was like, what can I control? At least okay, this could still blow up, but at least I can say I tried.
Yeah.
I was going through so many emotions. At least I went through like all the grief, like denial. And then I was angry. And then I was like in denial again and sad. And then I was like, listen, just do what you can and hustle and act like you have a lot at stake here, which would the world have ended? No. Would my career have ended? No.
Yes.
But I really felt like it was unfair to everybody involved to let this just go to pieces, including the people who had committed to coming.
Yeah, that's an awesome story. And I really think that, that the fact that you are someone and were trained to be someone with a backup plan played such a big role in that, because if you don't think that way, then you don't know what else to do.
Right. Truly. I tell my kids, because, I'm all about plan B and plan C and even a plan D. And I tell my kids, like, because that's how I manage their emotions. That's how I emotionally regulate my kids when we're like supposed to. They think we're going to go and do this experience, or we're going to go to Target and get a birthday gift. And they have their heart set on like, my son's really into like Mario and Luigi. And I'm like, what if they're out? Like, what's another thing that you would be equally as excited to get for your birthday? Because there are just some things you can't control. Like, it's not like Target doesn't want to give you this toy. It's not like you're a bad kid. It's not like you don't deserve it. It's just that we have logistical issues right now in our supply chain. So you need to come up with another thing that you want. And I don't want to have like a meltdown in aisle 4.
I love that.
Yeah. And he says to me, he goes, Mom, I got a plan B and a plan C, So
awesome.
I'm training my kids well for the real world.
That's beautiful. All right, I want to ask you one more question about investing.
Yes.
And if people have questions, Danielle, I'm sure you've got questions, so we can open it up a little bit. But really, I mean, when it comes to investing, whether you're self-employed or not, this is really an area that triggers a lot of anxiety and fear, especially with so much uncertainty, right, in the market and the global economy and recession or inflation or who knows what. So can you give any advice for investing at this time? And maybe even specifically, like if you're this age or if you're this age, because I think that you're right, that does play a big role.
Yeah. Well, investing is scary because it is unpredictable. And if you've lived life and you're at least 30 years old, you know that there can be really like long and devastating periods in the market where you don't see a gain for months, for a year, for longer, because of whatever, the recession, the pandemic, the confluence of events. But a lot of us don't have the perspective that I have, and it's not because I'm smarter, it's just because I do this for a living and I just see the data points, and it's my job, right, to research historical trends in the market, because this is a permeating fear in the market among all investors of all ages. Even the best ones are still like, are we doing this right? Because it is unpredictable. But but historically, if you invest in the US stock market over 10, 15, 20 years, you will do better than someone who chose not to invest. You will have more returns you will have compounded that money beautifully. And I love to say this one quote that it's beautiful. It's like, you don't have to be wealthy to invest, but you need to invest to be wealthy. Like, that's just it. You can't just put your money in a CD and call it a day. Although now, I mean, they're getting 5%. It's not a bad place to put some money. So that's just something I want to say at the get-go, that like everybody feels the fear, even the best investors, but lean on the historical data. Like, we can't assume that history will repeat, but it has done a pretty good job of doing exactly that for generations. So I trust that while there are going to be days that are devastating, there are more, and this is true, there are more up days than there are down days. And the stretches of time, the periods where there are what they call bull markets, where the market does very well, are longer than the periods of the bear markets when the market is not doing well. And so, for example, the Great Recession, I think we all remember that. That was 2008 to 2009, when we used to say like 401ks became 201ks. A lot of people pulled their money out of the stock market. They were terrified. Like, I can't do this for another 10 more years. And that's where their thinking was fraught. It's not going to happen for another 10 more years. If anything, for the next 11 years, we had a beautiful, like, upward trajectory market. If you had been investing, if you had just kept your money in the market, forget adding to it, you just kept your money in the market for between 2010 and 2020, you would have not only reversed your losses, but you would have seen incredible gains. And so that's important to remember. And I think that when you're, let's say if you're in your 20s, you can take a lot of risk. You can invest a lot of your money in the stock market. Like, if you're not all your money, but if you're creating a portfolio, if you go to your Vanguard or wherever and you open up an IRA, an individual retirement account, it's so easy these days. You don't even have to pick your stocks. You just say, like, here's my risk tolerance. Here's when I need this money. And they will do it for you. Like, when I was starting out, I had to, like, my company would give me like a book and they'd say, like, pick your 10 mutual funds or whatever. And I'm like, oh, it's like throwing darts. I have no idea what I'm doing. And we've realized that giving your money to a financial investor to invest your money is like throwing darts. Like, you better just give it to these algorithm-driven, data-driven platforms. They will do it for you more cost efficiently and honestly, like, with better returns. So lean on the robots, lean on the data, as I always say, the data-driven platforms, the automated platforms. Don't overthink it. And I would also say that if you're afraid of investing because you are afraid of the uncertainty today in doing so, like the idea of putting your money in the market and then the next month losing 20%, makes your stomach turn. I get it. But you know what's even more gut-wrenching is if you don't invest and in 20 years you have no savings. I think that's a more terrifying state of mind and like actual place to be in. And sometimes when I talk about the fear of money, and particularly with investing, it's important to extrapolate the fear. It's important to imagine if you are going to do what people typically do when they feel fear, which is do nothing or remain stuck, well, then that's not healthy. What is the effect of that? What is the scarier thing waiting for you in 10, 15, 20 years because you chose today to let fear control you, as opposed to say, I'm going to listen to this fear, I'm going to understand where it's coming from, but I'm still going to do the thing, but I'm going to do it in a way that protects what I need to protect. So for those of us who are afraid of losing a lot of money in the stock market, don't not invest. Invest, but do it slowly. Do it incrementally. Don't put like $10,000 in the market. Put in $500 a month, because that
Or
feels
100.
or 100 or wherever you can start. $10 a day in the U.S. stock market for the next 20 years is a lot of money. I think it's like hundreds of. It's not a million, but maybe if you do 30 years, it's a million.
Yeah.
So as I say, you don't have to be wealthy to invest. You got to start to get wealthy. So think about what's a potentially scarier thing awaiting you if you allow this fear to run you over, as opposed to saying, hey, fear, let's do this together and do it in a way that I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I'm not running into traffic. And I mean, as a kid, I used to that was how I dealt with fear. I was so terrified. I would just like run into traffic. I would, the opening of the book, I threw myself onto a car. That was a different time. There was something about cars and traffic and fear. I just thrusting myself into chaos, more chaos, like the irony, it's like, I don't want to be afraid. So I'm going to go do something like that's going to terrify everybody. But now I have agency and I have life experience and I have emotional intelligence and a developed brain. So now I can like actually do smarter things with my emotions. I can actually use them to my advantage.
I love that. I just put some money in Ellevest, right? Which is
yes,
focused AI robotic investing platform. So
great.
Excited about that.
What I like about Ellevest, and I haven't been on it in a while, but when Sally Krawcheck, who is a Wall Street veteran and one of the leading women in the financial world, started it with her own money largely, the way it works, and maybe this is how it worked with you, Elise, they like ask you what your goals are first, as opposed to like, what's your risk tolerance or how much money are you investing? It's ELLE Vest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Nancy has a question. Do you want to open it up, unmute yourself and ask a question?
Yeah. Sure. My husband is like 67. I don't really know. I'm 65. We have been investing for, I don't know, since the 80s and have definitely done well with it and have always run it at risk, the high risk level. So here we are, and we're like, we don't know when we're going to retire. We like what we're doing. When do you actually lower your risk level? Like, should we move it to moderate? I mean, when do you start doing it?
So, a rule of thumb, and it's just a shortcut, and it doesn't mean that everyone has to do this, but it's like, I always like to start with like, what's a good rule of thumb? And then kind of assess from there, do I like it? Does it feel right to me? Is it a good fit? But what we typically say in like financial advisors, quick answer is you take 110, you subtract your age, and whatever you're left with. So for you and your husband, like it's like 35, 45, because it used to be 100, subtract your age, and they raised it to 110, subtract your age. So like 110 minus 65 is like, what is that, 45? So that's the percentage that you can comfortably be in the stock market at this age, knowing that you're not retiring right away. You're not pulling all this money out right now. You can still afford some risk, but assuming that you will want to start drawing down on this in, the next 10 years, you don't want to be like 95% in the stock market, because one bad day and you've erased probably years worth of gains. That can happen. And that's not something that at this stage in your life you really want to probably can afford to make up for it, because then the idea is like, if it happens in your 20s or 30s, you're 95% invested in stocks and 5% maybe in bonds or cash. That's still probably okay. Maybe 80, 90%, because if the stock market if we go through another recession and the market has like a whole year of losses, well, that's okay, because you're in it for another 20 years at least. So in that time frame, it's likely that you're going to be up again, but it's going to take time. So that's the rule of thumb. But again, it really just depends on what you plan to do with this money, when you plan to start withdrawing. And if you never want to withdraw from it and you just want to kind of like leave it for your heirs, then you could probably take more risk, because it's not money that you're looking to tap right away to live off of.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Danielle has a question.
Yes. Hi, Farnoosh. Long-time listener, time caller. So I think what you said earlier about enough really resonated, and there was a lot of comments in the chat. And I think all of us here, everyone's an entrepreneur or solopreneur, which means we're all high achievers. And how did you determine for yourself, like, what you consider to be enough? Because I think we're surrounded by everyone, on influencers and making tons of money, or seemingly. And so at what point were you like, I know what I need and this is going to be my barrier for enough?
Mm-hmm. Well, I just did an episode, actually 2 episodes on this week. So if you're subscribed to So Money, there's some experts out there. There's a great book called Money Zen, which is all about this. And it's written by Manisha Thakor, who is like a 35-year veteran of personal finance and wealth advising. And she's one of the OGs in this space. And I really respect her perspective, because she's someone who kind of like didn't do it right. You know, she was like a hamster on a wheel, make money to make money. And I think that there's a degree of all us having to sort of go through that, because that's only how you realize, like, coming out on the other side of being that hamster on a wheel, you realize, oh, I don't like the way that happened, or I don't like that aspect of how I ran that part of my financial life. Burnout can be a great educator sometimes in your life. But I think that, first of all, I think that enough is a moving target. It's like your enough in your 20s is not what it's going to be in your 30s and your 60s. Like, of course, how could it be? It's like your life evolves, and so should your definition of enough. And you should give yourself permission to say, like, in this era of my life, I'm going to scale back, or I'm going to really I'm going to step on the gas, because part of how I define enough is, obviously there's a financial enough because I have real bills and I have real financial responsibilities. And do I have to have all the things that I have? No, but I'm really happy and content with how we are my husband and I have designed our lifestyle, and we know our values and we try to play to them. But, even like just today, I had a conversation with somebody who was like, there's like, your podcast could be so much bigger and this and that and 20-person team. And I was like, that gives me hives. Like, I don't want to be micromanaging. You have to know yourself. Like, what is energetically enough for you and what is pushing it? Because then I don't want to come home and be a sad mom, an unhappy wife, and like start to have, I know what I value. I know how I like to design my day. That's important. Like, what's an ideal day for you? What's an ideal week for you? What are the things that you don't like to do? Start with that, because that's probably, that list can then be a little bit more of a guide, I think, in terms of identifying what it is that would make you happy. And I've tried all the things. I used to have a team. I used to work, 100 hours a week. And that was a different time in my life. And I'm not saying I wouldn't do it again the same way. I think like for that era of my, like, almost like your money, like they say that your 20s till your 40s is like, it's about accumulating. And then it's about growth. And then it's about sort of maintaining. So if you think about your career in that way, it's sort of like, and of course, this isn't necessarily pegged to an age, because you might start a business in your 40s. So it's like phase 1, accumulating all the learnings, the failures, the do's and the don'ts, overworking, underworking. Like, you go through all of the mess, and then you kind of come out of that with a clearer vision of, okay, this is actually the map for the next chapter in the business, in my work life, in my financial life, because, I've outgrown maybe some of the things that I was doing. That's not me anymore, or that's not where my life is now. So I have priorities. Like, work is not the only thing anymore. So then it's about maybe cruise control and maintaining. It's different for everybody. Like, people say, like, what's your end game? And I'm like, if I could just keep doing what I'm doing, I could pace this. I could just keep it paced like this. I really enjoy what I do. I love that I can like be with you all. And then after this, I'm going to go get some lunch, and then I'm going to come back and do a podcast. And then I'm like, by 4:00, I'm with my kids when they come home from camp. Like, I've also realized that it's not about just like, I got to make money. So I started charging more for the same things. Like, once you start doing the thing that you do for a long time, like, and you're still charging beginner prices, like, that is an easy, low hanging fruit thing you can do to make more, but still have the life that feels enough in terms of your energy and time spent and investments made, of your time and money. And so, it's not always about working harder, right? It's like working smarter. We know that. And sometimes it's just, everybody here, if you've learned nothing in this hour, like, just raise your prices. And if you're not scared when you're asking for more money, you're
That's
not
right.
doing it right.
That's right. If you're not nervous about the number, it's not the right number.
Yeah. And I mean, just today, a guest I spoke to, her name is Kristen Keffler. She's an advisor to families that have a lot of wealth and resources. And sometimes when I bring guests like this on, it's like, okay, I can see the value in what they're bringing to the table. But sometimes listeners can be skeptical, like, well, how is she going to relate to what I'm going through? I'm struggling, or I don't have riches. But we talked a lot about, even when you're wealthy, you struggle emotionally with money. And when we talk about enough, we talk often about like the bottom line, the number, like if I just made $1 million, if I just made 10 million, if I just made $100 more in my, it's like, yeah, but then what? It doesn't like solve everything. You have to have emotional strength too. And solving for that is foundational before you can get to talking numbers. Like if you're not aware of what your goals are, what sparks joy, your turn-ons and your turn-offs, what your values are, like it doesn't matter how much you make because you're never going to feel fulfilled. And I've heard this from a lot of wealthy guests on my show, and maybe they're speaking from a place of more privilege, but nevertheless, I think it's something we can all latch onto, which is that it's, yes, making a minimum amount of money is important because you've got responsibilities and outside is expensive. But after that, it's about, does it really make sense to go make that effort to make more money if the ROI just isn't there in terms of my happiness, the quality of my life?
All right. I have one more question. And if there are other questions, let us know. But this has been awesome. Farnoosh, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
To the future for the last question to your children. I know a lot of people on this in the group have children. Like, besides the backup plan idea, how are you teaching or training your children about money and to think about money and handle their money?
My son just asked last week, Mommy, are we rich? Because we had just come home. All of us went over a new friend he made at camp. The family invited us all over to their house, which was really nice, to a pool party. And we get to this house and it's a mansion. And I mean, I'm not even exaggerating. And this little boy, who's my son's age, has, I kid you not, like an entire, like the size of my first apartment in New York, even bigger, is all dedicated to his gaming. And there's a movie theater sized screen and like three rows of like armchairs. And then there's like 4 other screens and there's an AI thing going on, like virtual reality. I'm like, and very nice, humble people, but they had a lot of stuff. They had a lot of like just shiny objects. And of course my kids like didn't want to leave. I couldn't wait to get out of there. But my son on the ride home, he was like, oh, I wish I had a bigger house like him. And why don't we have a pool? And and I was like, I've been waiting for this your whole life. Like this is going to happen. And I have friends who are like, we want to not have our kids hang out with rich kids because it's bad influence. And I'm like, no, they have to see how everybody lives. The opportunity here is when they ask you, are we rich or why don't we have that, is like, this is, first of all, they're curious now. You've got an attentive audience. And that is a great opportunity to start feeding your kids what you want them to learn about your financial values. So when he asked me, are we rich? And he's 9, I didn't say yes or no. And I didn't want to even get into that because I don't even like the word rich or poor. Like, I just feel like those are unfair labels and like, whatever. That's not, I don't think what's going to help him become a financial citizen. It's like, I said, I think that's a good question, but I think that what I would say to that is like, I definitely feel rich. Your father and I, we work really hard. We're really careful about how we spend based on what we want to do, what we think is important for our family. And we don't think it's important to have like a house that's 10 times bigger than than our house. Like, if you remember, we came from an apartment, it was much smaller. Like, we feel like this is like so spectacular. And, I think that I said something along the lines of like, no matter how much money you're making, you have to make choices with that money. And his family is making different choices, and we're going to make our own choices. And when you make your own money, you can make your own choices. But that's what it really comes down to. And whether or not you feel rich or are rich, it comes down to if you're making the right choices with your money. And there's more to this that I will share with him as he gets older. But I felt like I don't want to go into, when kids ask you about money, it's beautiful. It's a sign that they're curious. And I think the opportunity for the adults in the room is to feed the curiosity, ask them questions. Like, why are you curious? Sometimes when kids ask about this stuff, it's not because maybe they're having FOMO necessarily, but it's because they just want to know that we're secure. I remember during the pandemic, during the first recession, I was a columnist for 17 magazine, which the average reader is 12. I learned it's not 17. And so these 12-year-old girls, I had an advice column, and the 12-year-old girls would write to me and say, my mom just got laid off and I want to help, but I'm not really sure like what to say. And she doesn't talk to me about what's going on. And I would, it was all very new to me. And I was like, wow, I guess, kids want to have more potential than we give them credit for in terms of like being aware of what's happening and wanting to help and wanting to step up and have those conversations with their parents. So when they show signs of curiosity or wanting to help, like don't squash it. That's how we perpetuate this culture where we don't talk about money. Money is taboo. And then we struggle in secret. That kids have so much to learn and give in your household financial dynamics. And it starts at home because we don't learn about this in school. So, if you really want to make this a priority in your family, I think it's like one of the best gifts you can give your kids.
I love that. And Nita wrote so much wisdom today. It's true. It's been amazing. Thank you so much for staying the whole hour. Also, Farnoosh, we really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is you're so great. I love this audience. You're all so lovely and generous. I'm so grateful for the support. If you like the book, leave a review, share it. I think that the grassroots, these sorts of engagements I'm in it for the long game. I'm not just trying to sell all these books to, hit a bestseller list the first week and then go back to living my life. Like, this is going to become my life's work for a while. And I look forward to it. And this is just the beginning. So it's nice to be able to spend the early days with you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you everyone for showing up.
Sorry, I was just going to say, Farnoosh, you have like a group of people that you're rallying around the book, like a community. Do you want to let everyone here know in case they want to join?
And we can share that link also in the follow-up.
Sure. Yeah, it's called Panic Posse. And we just had our kickoff call yesterday. It's just if you're interested in book writing or learning more about the behind the scenes, it's a forum where I realize like what the members are giving me is basically support and ideas and reviews, which are so important on Amazon and Goodreads. And in return, I'm offering just really like these calls where we just get on and I talk about what's working, what's not with the book, fun facts, but also opportunities to come to, ticketed events that I'm hosting and things like that. So if you're interested, let me know. And by the way, because you are here, I'm giving, if you go to ahealthystateofpanic.com and you just fill out the form, and it's going to ask you for an upload of a receipt for the book, but just like upload, I don't know, take a picture of like your plant or whatever. Like it's not going to reject. It just needs an upload of something like a PDF or a Word document. Like no one is like looking at this, like verifying, but I'll know. And you'll automatically get my Scared Smart 3 video training, which is essentially the Fear of Money chapter in the book that I created, of sort of interactive video element and workbook to get you a head start on that. So you don't have to wait till October 3rd to get the goods on how to master your financial fears.
We'll coordinate and put all of those links when we send out the replay to everyone.
Yeah.
Great.
Including how to be part of the Panic Posse.
Yeah, to be part of the Panic Posse, just email me and I'll add you to the list. There's really no like opt-in for that. It's just I had a form that people were filling out all of last 2 weeks, but I've retired that. I didn't think anybody else was interested. So, but yeah, if you'd like to join, let me know. Thank you.
So you're okay when we send the recap out if we share your email address?
Yes. Mm-hmm. For sure.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Farnoosh.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Wasn't that great? We had a great time, and I trust that came through as you listened. I hope you learned a little something too. Now, go buy the book. And if you want to build a thriving business on your own terms, the first step is to sign up for my quick tips at marketing-mentortips.com. Once you're on the site, you'll find lots more resources, including my simplest marketing plan. So enjoy, and I'll see you next time.